5 gunshots broke the peace of that night. 5 echoes that chased through the streets until they reached my ears. By the time I reached the gym, the hands that once hugged me were covered in blood. The streetlights reflected off her silver bracelet, the one I gave when she told me she was pregnant. That light was dying too. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. They said the ambulance was coming. But when you've worn a uniform your whole life, you learn how minutes become hours when someone you love is bleeding. She was lying there on the cold pavement, her chest barely moving, her lips trembling like she wanted to say something but couldn't. I knelt, pressing my hand against her wound, telling her to stay with me, telling her lies, because I could already see the truth in her eyes. Violet, my only child. The crowd around us whispered. The fighters from the boxing gym stood behind police tape, pretending they didn't know her. Men built like iron statues, heads bowed like children. I looked at each of their faces. One of them flinched. I would never forget that face. She tried to open her mouth again. Blood stained her teeth as she whispered something only I could hear. They laughed. Daddy, they laughed. Then her hand went cold. The sound that came out of me wasn't a sob. It was something older, heavier, the kind of sound a man makes when the last thing good in his life is stolen. The next hours were a blur of paperwork and hollow apologies. Hospital forms. Police questions. The smell of bleach and death in the hallway. Commander Adrian, we'll investigate, the officer said quietly. I recognized the tone. It was the same one I'd used when I wanted a superior to stop asking questions. They didn't want to find the killers. Not when those 5 boys were local heroes, trained under Coach Logan's banner, sponsored by big names, protected by bigger ones. When you've spent decades in the army, you can tell when a system is already surrendering. This town's justice waved the white flag before I even buried my daughter. That night, I stood outside the same gym, past midnight. The police had left. The air smelled of sweat, old tape, and gunpowder. I stepped inside, ignoring the crime scene notice on the door. Every sound in that gym echoed. The flickering light, the uneven hum of the vending machine, the slow creak of boxing bags swaying from the ceiling. Blood still stained the corner of the ring. They hadn't even cleaned it properly. Beside it, something caught my eye. A single locket, half crushed beneath a shoe print. Inside was a sonogram photo. My grandchild's heartbeat frozen in gray lines. She'd kept it with her that night. I fell to my knees. My uniform had seen too much blood over decades, but this stain was different. It carried my name, my failure. In the morning, the press had already changed the story. Tragic accident outside local gym. Investigation ongoing. Accident. 5 trained fighters. 1 unarmed pregnant woman. They called it an accident. At the funeral, half the town showed up. Most to look, not to mourn. Some whispered that she'd been mixed up with the wrong man. Others said maybe it was a robbery gone wrong. Only Fiona, my friend from old days in the service, now a criminal lawyer, stood beside me the entire time. When everyone left and the air finally went still, she said, Adrian, they'll try to bury this. There's money behind those boys. I've buried my daughter, I said. There's nothing left of me they can bury. Her hand trembled on my shoulder. Promise me you won't do something reckless. Do I look reckless? I asked. She didn't answer, because even silence can smell danger. That night, I sat in Violet's room. Everything was still there. The books, the cotton blanket, the small crib she'd bought last month, waiting for a child who'd never arrive. There was peace in that silence, the kind that doesn't come from love, but from finality. I searched her phone, message after message from names I didn't know, until I found one that stopped me cold. Mason. Scrolling up, I saw the truth unfold like a knife opening slowly. You think you can ignore me forever? You think your dad's stars can protect you? You made me a joke to my friends. You won't laugh next time you see me. The last message was sent an hour before those gunshots. Something in me turned to iron. My pulse slowed. My hand stopped shaking. Years of discipline snapped back into place. Not for a mission, not for a command, but for a purpose. The next morning, I drove to the precinct. The officer on duty said they'd questioned Mason and the others briefly. They all claimed they were sparring at the time of the incident. No witnesses. CCTV conveniently erased. The file was thin, too clean. Corruption has a smell. It's oil and greed mixed with cowardice, and the whole department reeked of it. I looked at the officer's badge. You've got exactly 7 days to fix this. After that, I don't follow your rules. He smiled nervously. You're threatening me, Commander? No, I said quietly. I'm just reminding you what happens when rules fail. That evening, as the sun died behind the gym, I parked across the street and watched the 5 of them exit laughing. Mason was at the front, chewing gum, tossing his trophy into the air, catching it like he hadn't murdered a child. The others, Kyle, Tristan, Preston, Blake, mocked him, but it was the kind of mockery that comes from shared sin. I gripped the steering wheel and whispered each of their names until they etched into my memory. Not as enemies, not as soldiers, as targets of truth. They thought this was done. They thought she was buried and forgotten. But they didn't know what it means when a father who's been a soldier starts praying in silence. When I reached home, Fiona was waiting at my porch. She looked tired. What are you planning, Adrian? I poured her coffee, made her sit. Tell me everything you can find about Coach Logan and those 5. She frowned. Why? Because I intend to rebuild what they call justice. She rubbed her forehead. You know what this reminds me of? She whispered. The old field stories you used to tell. About strategic warfare. About knowing your target before you strike. I stepped closer, voice steady. This isn't war, Fiona. She looked up, eyes sharp. It sounds like it. I smiled faintly. Wars end. This won't. Not until she sleeps in peace. Later that night, I went back to the gym once more, no police this time. Just me, the silence, and her ghost. I placed the sonogram photo on the ring floor. You weren't born, I whispered, but you'll have your justice. Then I looked at the hanging heavy bag, a shape of red leather, swaying with the night breeze. My reflection stared back, broken and calm. Somewhere between that silence and dawn, I made a vow. No soldiers, no guns, no uniforms. I'd make them walk through the same pain they gave. Slowly, quietly, completely. They wouldn't see the war coming, because I wasn't bringing the army. I was bringing a father's truth. For 3 nights after the funeral, sleep avoided me. I used to believe discipline could silence grief, that empty corridors and a soldier's routine could bury pain under schedules. But grief doesn't respect ranks. It walks with you, breathes beside you, whispers reminders every time the clock strikes the same hour the shots were fired. When morning finally came, I drove back to where everything ended. The yellow tape fluttered half-torn. The police had already moved on. The gym loomed like a monument built for arrogance. Its windows dark, glass reflecting the sunlight just enough to hurt my eyes. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of sweat, rubber, and something metallic that no cleaning chemical could rinse away. My boots echoed across the floor as I traced the path she must have taken that night. The hallway, the side exit, the spot where her blood met concrete. The janitor looked at me once and lowered his gaze, pretending not to recognize me. I kept walking until I reached Logan's office. The nameplate glimmered behind a glass door. Logan Matthews, head coach. The door wasn't locked. On his desk sat 2 whiskey glasses, one unfinished, and a framed photo of the 5 boxers holding their golden gloves after some recent championship. I memorized each face again. Pride looked disgusting when worn by cowards. My phone buzzed. Fiona's voice came through, steady but quiet. Adrian, I pulled the police file. It's already labeled closed investigation pending evidence. That's code for buried. Who signed it? I asked. Chief Dalton, Logan's cousin. I looked at the photo once more and almost laughed. Connections, chains, and cowardice, the holy trinity of corruption. Before leaving, something on the floor caught my eye. A broken security camera lens beside the filing cabinet, wires cut surgically clean. Not an accident. Someone erased their own guilt. Back in my car, I stared at the gym's signboard one last time. Grindmaster Boxing Academy. They train their hands to strike and their souls to disappear. That evening I visited Fiona's firm. She placed a thin folder on her desk. This is everything public about them. Records, sponsors, schedules. But there's more under the surface. Mason's father is a state councilman. The others belong to families that fund the local sports board. I flipped through the pages while she spoke. So you're telling me there are no witnesses? I said. Except one, she whispered, passing me a slip. A street vendor named Eliza. She was across the road that night. She heard screams before the gunshots. The next day she disappeared. I exhaled slowly. Money buys silence faster than fear ever could. Fiona leaned forward. Promise me you won't do what I think you're about to. What you think, I replied, sliding the folder into my bag. And what's already done are two different things. By dusk I was back on the road, tracing Eliza's last known route. Her cart was gone, replaced by an empty corner and a new surveillance camera blinking at the intersection. Someone had made sure the old footage would never resurface. Down the block, an old man watching from his window said quietly, "You're not the first one looking for her." Who else came? Two men from the gym. Fancy cars, polite tone, dead eyes. She left town that same night. I thanked him and walked away. Each step sank heavier. Each thought sharpened colder. Justice wasn't blind here. It was bought, dressed, and escorted by bodyguards. Days turned to weeks. I kept collecting threads. Fiona helped silently, sending files through coded emails, bank transactions, fake medical clearances, sponsorship records showing Logan paying off the police athletic board to protect his fighters. Every piece brought clarity. Every name connected to another like a web spun around Violet's grave. One evening, while reviewing footage from traffic cameras, I noticed something. The timestamp from the gym street camera stopped exactly 9 minutes before the murder and resumed 12 minutes after. The maintenance record showed power failure due to storm. Weather reports proved there was no storm for 40 miles. Someone on the inside had flipped that switch, someone who knew timing and procedure. I didn't curse. Soldiers learn not to. I simply marked the date, location, and name of the electrician authorized for repairs. Preston's brother. Patterns reveal guilt faster than confessions ever could. Late one night, I drove past the gym again. The ring lights were still on though the door was locked. Through the window, I saw the 5 of them training, laughing, living freely in the same place that still carried her blood. Logan stood by the corner, shouting orders, smiling with pride. It was then I realized something fundamental. Men like these only fear loss. So I would start there. Not with guns. With consequences. The next morning, a quiet call from an unknown number. "Sir, this is Grant from Ironvale Properties. We received your proposal about purchasing a sports facility." "Yes," I said. "The Grindmaster gym papers are ready whenever you wish to finalize." For a brief moment, silence filled my lungs. I looked out the window at the world still spinning, ordinary, unaware that its balance had just shifted. I met Fiona at a diner away from the city. "You bought the gym?" she asked, disbelief whispering through her tone. "Under another name," I answered. "And what exactly will that accomplish?" I stirred my coffee, watching the swirl. "I'll own their pride. Every wall they trained against, every glove they hung, every ring they bled on. It'll belong to the man they destroyed." She didn't speak for a long time. Then, softly, "Adrian, there's turning grief into action, and then there's losing yourself inside it." I placed a letter on the table. "Inside this envelope is the authorization for you to dissolve all connections between me and the purchase. If anything happens, you're protected. You'll also find an extra document." "What is it?" "My will." Before she could respond, I rose, put my cap back on, and left. There was nothing left to argue. The renovation started quietly. New management, new policies. Logan received an offer he couldn't refuse. Triple payment, same title, and no clue who signed it. Cameras were installed again. this time with a system I personally designed. Every corner of that gym became a witness. Within days, news spread. The gym had new investors promising to take it national. The 5 fighters celebrated, thinking their careers were reborn. They never noticed the microphones beneath the lockers, the digital locks that only I controlled, the contracts that gave me the right to monitor operations 24 hours a day. Grief may blind ordinary men. It trained me instead. One evening, as I watched the live feed from my office, I saw Mason standing in the ring, showing off as usual. His arrogance hadn't changed. His laughter still thundered through the speakers. The others circled him with mock applause. Yet behind that laughter, beneath that gym full of muscles and ego, there was rust forming. And soon, I'd make sure it spread. I turned off the monitor and looked at the photograph of Violet and me on my desk. The edges were wearing out, but her eyes still shone like they did before life went cruel. Rest, I whispered to the emptiness of the room. They're training for their own judgment. Weeks blended together, measured not by days, but by discoveries. Owning the gym gave me access to more than walls and lockers. It unlocked their habits, their fears, their arrogance in raw form. Every night after the doors closed, I watched hours of their footage. They were loud, restless, and too young to understand how guilt corrodes from inside out. Mason barked orders even when Logan wasn't around. He acted like a king who believed kingdoms couldn't fall. Kyle bragged about new cars. Preston practiced alone with an expression that already hinted at regret. Tristan laughed too hard at things that weren't funny, and Blake, the quietest, filmed everything. Cameras had always been their comfort. They recorded victories, not consequences. Now, those same cameras recorded their undoing. I built a small workspace in the back office. No uniforms, no medals, only Violet's photograph and a wall of notes. Every clue connected to another like veins under skin. Fiona came by one evening, carrying a flash drive. "This is Mason's file," she said, placing it on the desk. "You were right. He and Violet dated last year." She filed a harassment complaint that never reached court. His cousin in the precinct lost it. My throat tightened, and she never told me. "She probably tried," Fiona said gently. "Maybe you were away." I remembered that week. I was stationed overseas leading a tactical unit. The mission was classified. The memory turned to poison. While I was protecting strangers, my daughter was being hunted by someone she'd once loved. On the drive home, regret filled every inch of silence. Soldiers learn to detach so they can function, but fatherhood doesn't come with a switch. Somewhere along the marches and medals, I'd stopped hearing the things she never said. The next morning, I summoned Logan to my office under pretense of new sponsorship updates. He walked in cheerful, smelling of cologne and confidence. "Sir, heard you're expanding the franchise," he said, shaking my hand like we'd been old friends. I smiled. "Expansion starts with rebuilding loyalty. You've done well molding them into beasts." He laughed proudly. "Best fighters in the region. Tough, fearless, disciplined." "Undisciplined enough?" I said quietly, sliding a photo across the desk. The one taken minutes before the shooting, captured from a neighbor's phone, faces blurred on purpose. "Recognize anyone?" The smile faded halfway. He pushed it back slowly. "Looks like random kids." "What?" "Because random kids don't delete security footage," I replied. He leaned back, pretending calm. "You think my boys were involved?" "That's a wild assumption for a businessman." I met his eyes. "I've lived wild. And I don't assume." Sweat formed on his temple, even though the office was chilled. "Sir, you've got to understand. Press and sponsors love these fighters. Their careers mean something to this town." "Careers end," I said evenly. "But justice doesn't expire." He left with cautious politeness. I watched him walk out, shoulders stiff like a soldier hiding a wound. Later that evening, the lights went out inside the gym during closing. On the cameras, I saw Mason lingering near the equipment room. When power returned, the locker of one of his teammates was open, files scattered, a phone missing. Mason had stolen his friend's phone. I waited until dawn to review the recovered data through remote software. One recording froze my blood. A voice note from Mason's group chat dated 2 weeks before the murder. She ruined me. Told everyone I hit her. She's lying. Next time she crosses the parking lot, we'll make her pay. I'll make her beg. If her daddy's a hero, let him save her for once. The others laughed in the background. I listened again, every second heavier than gunfire. Grief shifted into calculation. Revenge wasn't rage anymore. It was clarity sharpened like a blade. I started collecting every trace of evidence. Screenshots, voice clips, deleted footage retrieved from overwritten drives. Quietly, legally, meticulously. Fiona called the next day. I found the name of the person who erased the footage, Security Officer Nathaniel Reed. He resigned that same night. Guess who deposited $50,000 into his account 2 hours later? Logan. She sighed. You already knew. I did. Because men like Logan never dirted their hands. They paid others to wash theirs. 2 days later, a delivery arrived at my office. No return address. Inside was a box containing a gold-plated boxing glove signed by Mason and the others. A note attached read, "For our loyal sponsor." They thought I was just money. That's the beauty of masks. You can be anything they want while planning everything they fear. That night, Blake arrived late and began shadowboxing alone. Through the live feed, I watched him stop suddenly and stare at the same corner where Violet had fallen months ago. He sat down, hands trembling, then pulled out his phone. His message to Mason read, "We shouldn't have done it. She didn't deserve it." No response came. Guilt had finally chosen one of them as its host. Days later, Fiona and I met behind the courthouse cafeteria. "They're sponsoring a city tournament next month," she said. "Police will provide security. It's going to be their biggest event since before." I understood immediately. Then, that's where I'll start turning their world inside out. "You'll expose them publicly?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "I'll make them crack first. The truth means more when it bleeds out on its own." She exhaled. "You sound different." "Grief changes the frequency of your voice," I said. Over the next week, subtle changes began inside the gym. The air conditioning faltered. Equipment malfunctioned. Water pressure dropped mid-training. A digital broadcast accidentally played a short clip of Violet smiling while holding her baby's ultrasound photo during a team session, just for 3 seconds before self-erasing. They froze. Mason yelled for the technician. No one spoke, but fear crept in like smoke. Behind the surveillance room door, I watched them unravel slowly. The gym they once owned no longer felt safe. It wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by memory. One evening, Fiona found me still awake in the office. "You've gathered enough evidence, Adrian," she said. "You could hand all this to federal investigators." I closed the laptop. "Not yet. Evidence punishes their names. I want their souls punished first." She frowned. "And afterward?" "Afterward," I said quietly. "The law can have what's left." Outside, thunder rolled even though the forecast said clear skies. The world felt it too, something shifting, moving quietly toward reckoning. Later that night, I revisited Violet's voicemail archive once more, scrolling to the oldest clip. Her voice played softly. "Dad, you always said the strongest people fight quiet battles. I hope I never have to. But if I do, I'll remember how you stand." Tears blurred the screen until her voice became static. I whispered back into the emptiness, "You won't have to fight anymore." In the silence that followed, it felt like she heard me. The storm that night never reached the ground. It circled the clouds like hesitation refusing to fall. Inside the office, every light was on, every wall covered with photos, newspaper cuttings, maps, and timestamps. It wasn't obsession. It was preparation. Soldiers don't move until the terrain is fully understood, and this battlefield was called Grindmaster Gym. Each boxer had a profile. Mason, volatile leadership, ego wounded by exposure. Kyle, follower driven by fear of losing status. Preston, money hungry, loyal to whoever paid most. Tristan, the loud distraction who hid guilt behind noise. Blake, the only one showing signs of conscience. Together they'd built a fortress. I was dismantling it, brick by brick. Fiona stood at the doorway, arms crossed, watching the web of strings stretching across the boards. "It looks like war prep," she said quietly. "It is," I answered without turning. "You promised me you wouldn't bring the army back into this." I placed another pin on the map. "You can never leave what built you. You just changed the enemy." She walked closer, taking in the chaos. "You've been up 3 nights. I used to lead missions with less sleep." "This isn't the front line," she murmured. "It is," I replied. "Only difference is, the uniforms here are branded with sponsors instead of flags." Her sigh drifted between us. "Then at least win this war clean, Adrian." I didn't respond. The silence said enough. At sunrise, I called a meeting with the gym staff. New funding meant expansion, and I needed eyes inside. They didn't know the true mission. They just thought they were part of a rebranding project. I introduced a new recruitment campaign. Civilian trainers, fresh assistants, and most importantly, veterans like Hunter, a retired combat instructor known for breaking egos while healing discipline. Hunter arrived mid-week, tall, quiet, carrying a metal cane from an old leg injury. He shook my hand once, eyes reading me in a second. "You want soldiers disguised as coaches," he said. "I want order disguised as reform," I corrected. He nodded. "Understood." Within a week, the environment shifted. The music level dropped, training schedules intensified, diet rules changed. Logan hated it, but couldn't protest. I was his paycheck now. The boxers started missing sessions under the strain. Mason confronted Hunter on day 6, shouting that military rules didn't belong in a boxing club. Hunter didn't raise his voice. He just stared. Mason stepped back without realizing why. Control had changed hands, and they felt it. Fiona visited later carrying fresh reports. "You've drained their sponsor accounts through contract clauses you wrote yourself," she said, eyebrows raised. "Insurance claims, equipment replacements, they have no idea they're losing money." "They won't until they try to spend it," I said. She handed me another sheet. "News stations are running coverage next week on corruption in sports finance. Want to feed them something?" "Not yet. Let them sweat first." She smiled faintly. "You always did believe tension could reveal truth faster than torture." "Tension builds character," I said, "and in their case, cracks." Over the next month, subtle chaos became normal. Mason's car was impounded due to unpaid taxes, documents I'd quietly forwarded to authorities. Kyle lost his endorsement deal after an anonymous tip exposed steroid use, footage courtesy of Blake's own careless recordings. Preston's gambling habits surfaced publicly through leaked screenshots. Tristan received notice that his scholarship funds were frozen pending investigation. None of it was coincidence. Every move was deliberate, slow, calculated. The same rhythm I'd once used marking enemy routes. I wanted them cornered by their own reflections. Logan tried to intervene. He stormed into my office waving paperwork. "What are you doing to my boys? They're being ruined." I met his anger with stillness. "You mean they're finally accountable? You'll destroy the gym." The gym already destroyed itself the night it turned into a crime scene. He slammed the door, leaving, muttering threats that sounded weaker than the echoes behind him. One night, Hunter stepped into my office. "You ever plan to tell them why you're really here?" "They know enough," I said. He studied the wall of photos. "You think this fixes you when it's done?" "I'm not fixing anything. I'm balancing it." He nodded slowly. "Balance always leaves someone empty." "Then let it be me," I said. He walked out without another word. In this kind of silence, respect speaks louder than advice. Weeks later, Fiona brought new intelligence. Logan was in debt. To keep the gym afloat, he'd taken secret funding from a lender connected to underground matches, illegal betting. The same network that once tried to recruit my unit for protection overseas. Fate truly had a perverse sense of irony. "Use it," Fiona said. "Not yet," I replied. "People like Logan fall harder when they stand taller." Let him feel safe again first. That evening, I invited the entire team for a public ceremony. Press, sponsors, city officials, all to announce our new era program. Cameras flashed, microphones caught laughter. Mason shook my hand for show, smiling through clenched teeth. His voice dripped with false gratitude as he whispered, "You're either with us or in our way, old man." I leaned close enough so he could hear my calm. "You've already chosen which side of history you're on." The photographers captured that handshake. They didn't see the war beginning between two smiles. By midnight, the gym was empty but alive with echoes. I walked the floor alone, touching the ropes of the ring. The same rope where blood had once splattered now gleamed under new lights. It had taken months, but the stage was reset. Every camera, every account, every secret was under my control. Justice wasn't coming anymore. It was already inside these walls, patient and breathing. When I finally returned home, I found Violet's old training gloves on my doorstep wrapped in brown paper. No name, no note, just her initials stitched inside. Someone had remembered. Maybe guilt had hands after all. I carried them to my study and placed them beside her photograph. "Tomorrow," I murmured. "Tomorrow we start turning truth into confession." The wind outside shifted then, shaking the windows like distant applause. Somewhere beyond the city, thunder rolled again. This time it wasn't waiting. The next morning began with a whistle. Hunter's voice cut through sweat and arrogance like steel through silence. "No phones, no music, no freestyle drills. You train as I say, or you walk." The fighters groaned and used to command. Mason laughed first, but his voice faded when Hunter stepped close enough for him to feel the scar running down that old soldier's jaw. By noon, the men were exhausted. Discipline had stripped their swagger. They were learning something the ring had never taught: humility. I watched from the mezzanine, arms folded, unseen behind tinted glass. The place looked the same but felt different, charged with quiet tension. Each punch echoed like repentance forming slowly. Hunter later reported, "They're cracking faster than I thought." "They were built on applause," I said. "Take away the crowd, and they don't know who they are." He grinned faintly. "You turning them human before you bury them?" "Just giving them a mirror," I answered. By the third week, Logan's patience with the new regime evaporated. He confronted me again, his voice roughened by whiskey. "You're killing these kids. They can't even win minor matches now." "They're not kids," I said evenly. "They're weapons forged without conscience. I'm dulling the blade before it cuts again." He slammed his fists on my desk. "They need freedom." "They had it," I replied. "They used it to kill." The pause afterward was sharp. Logan left without another word, jaw tight. From the window, I watched him pace the parking lot, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. Guilt or fear? Both look the same when you finally see them clearly. Hunter doubled training loads. Kyle's shoulder gave out. Tristan's footwork collapsed after a sprain. No one laughed anymore, not even Mason. The gym's cheers had turned into grunts and coughs. That's when I introduced the cameras again. Not hidden now, visible and constant. Rebroadcast system, I told them. Sponsors love transparency. They didn't realize every clip streamed privately to me. Their words, their tempers, their confessions. It all turned into evidence I didn't have to demand. When exhaustion bites deep enough, people tell on themselves. At night, Mason vented to Preston near the locker row. "This place feels cursed. Since that girl died, nothing's right." Preston muttered, "Don't talk about it. You'll bring bad luck." Mason spat on the floor. "Luck left when she started running her mouth." I paused the feed and rewound once. The contempt still lived where guilt should. That, I decided, would not survive another month. Days passed. I began altering routines quietly. New dietary supplements that weakened stamina, longer sparring hours. False rumors leaked through anonymous sources. Every blow they gave started returning heavier. Sponsors withdrew under financial review. Their national match invitations vanished from schedules. Within 6 weeks, The wolves of Grindmaster Gym were just 5 angry men with fading reputations. Fiona called one night, worry edging her voice. Adrian, you're turning a gym into a psychological testing ground. Correction, I said. Justice doesn't test. It reveals. Reveals what? True character. And eventually, confession. She sighed. I thought you wanted peace. This is peace, Fiona. It just doesn't sound gentle. During the next training, Hunter staged a final endurance drill. He split them into pairs, forced blindfolded sparring to teach trust. Mason refused. Hunter ignored him, pairing him with Blake anyway. Within minutes, Mason lost balance. Blake's gloves pressed him hard to the ropes until frustration erupted. Mason ripped off the blindfold, swinging wildly, missing. The others watched wordless. Hunter lowered his whistle. You can't lead when you fear your own darkness, he said, turning his back on Mason's fury. The silence after that was electric. Pride bruises slower than skin, but deeper. That evening, Blake lingered when everyone left. He walked into my office unannounced, sweat still dripping down. Sir, he began carefully, whatever you're trying to do here, it's working. How so? They're scared. Not of losing. Of something else. This place feels haunted. Does it? I asked quietly. He nodded. Sometimes I think I hear her name echoed during sparring. I kept my face calm. Maybe that's conscience trying to remember. He looked confused but didn't press, just wiped his forehead and left. The door closed softly behind him, leaving the scent of guilt in the air like smoke that refused to clear. Logan tried one last attempt to regain control. He scheduled an unsanctioned fight night, offered cash prizes, called it redemption practice. Informal, secret, illegal. When I heard, I didn't stop it. I promoted it quietly instead. My reason was simple. Truth surfaces easiest in chaos. The night of the fight, the gym overflowed. Crowds shouted, cameras rolled, bets exchanged. I stood among them ordinary, unrecognized, hands in jacket pockets. Hunter managed the ring. Mason fought first, aggressive, raw, desperate. He won but collapsed at the bell, sweating unnaturally. Panic rushed through the crowd. Trainers screamed for medics. He survived, barely. Doctors blamed exhaustion and energy pills. Pills Logan had distributed. The next morning, headlines read, illegal substances found in local coach's locker. Logan denied everything, but the pills were tagged through serial code, purchased under his name 2 weeks earlier. I released that evidence anonymously online. Overnight, the Wolves lost their coach to a criminal investigation. Fiona appeared at my door with a newspaper folded under her arm. You just destroyed a man's career. He built it on someone else's grave, I said. You're enjoying this, she accused softly. I stared at Violet's photo. No, I'm remembering what pleading eyes look like when there's no rescue coming. Days later, the gym reopened under new interim management. The fighters returned without Logan, hollow-eyed, leaderless. They looked at me differently now, sensing authority deeper than paperwork. Mason avoided my gaze. Kyle barely spoke. During stretches, Preston muttered prayers. Fear was carving them faster than any punishment could. That evening, I gathered them in the ring. You all want redemption? I said without raising my voice. They nodded, hesitant. Then earn it. Tomorrow, the rules change again. No coach, no cameras, no audience. Only you and the truth that keeps following you. The ring lights dimmed behind me as I walked away. Their whispers chased my leaving footsteps, fragments of nerves unraveling. Behind them on the wall, a new banner hung silently. The gym's motto replaced overnight. Honor doesn't bleed. Lies do. In the glow of my office lamp, I marked the date on the board. Every mission has thresholds. This was the halfway mark. The breaking point. Somewhere in that heavy quiet, I felt Violet's presence again, soft, forgiving, near. Grief had stopped feeling like weight. It had turned into direction. Justice was no longer a plan. It was rhythm, heartbeat, inevitability. The morning after that meeting, the gym felt unnaturally still. Usually, the The metallic clang of gloves striking bags filled the halls by sunrise, but now only the faint hum of ceiling fans moved through the air. Hunter warned me. Something's shifting. They're nervous, but Mason's pride is wounded. That's when men like him make mistakes. He was right. By noon, Mason began lashing out, verbal, impatient, snapping at everyone. Cal muttered under his breath that he'd had enough. Preston packed his bag halfway through training, threatening to quit. Fear eats unity faster than betrayal does, and they were starving. I stayed upstairs, watching through the tinted glass until Mason punched a mirror, splintering his reflection into shards. Blood trickled down his knuckle, but he didn't stop. He stared at his reflection and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he turned suddenly, eyes looking straight toward the window where he couldn't possibly see me. Chill raced through me anyway. That evening, Fiona arrived with new documents. The court dropped Logan's charges, she said, disgusted. Insufficient evidence. Someone cleared it faster than expected. He has friends in higher echelons, I replied. Then you'll need witnesses, she said. Real ones. People who can stand in front of cameras and speak. Maybe guilt will give me some, I said. She studied me carefully. You've changed. You don't even blink anymore when you talk about their lives. I'm past blinking, I said evenly. Tears blind vision. 2 days later, the inevitable happened. Hunter entered my office, expression grim. Mason wants to talk. Alone. I nodded. Bring him after hours. When the gym emptied that night, Mason walked in without gloves, hands taped casually. He didn't sit. His confidence had cracks thinner than hairlines, but spreading fast. You own this place, he said flatly. You pull the strings, change routines, ruin our names. What's your endgame? I thought you'd recognize it, I said, closing the file on my desk. Justice. You've heard of it. His smirk faltered. Justice? You think you know what happened? You killed Violet, I said. The words weren't loud, but they filled every inch of silence between us. He tried to laugh, but the sound came uneven. You have no proof. You want proof. I slid the phone across the table, his own voice message, recovered, playing faintly. She ruined me. She'll pay. Let her father save her. He froze. Hands twitched. Where did you get that? Guilt has a strange way of leaving fingerprints, I said. For the first time, his eyes darted toward the photo hanging behind my desk. Violet and me, smiling under a blue sky untouched by blood. Something broke inside him then. Not remorse, but memory. He slumped into the chair. You think I pulled the trigger? You were there, I said. I didn't shoot her, he muttered. His voice cracked enough to sound human. The confession unfolded slowly, words clawing out like splinters. He said they hadn't planned to kill her, only to scare her after she left him. They followed, taunting, shouting twisted jokes. She'd called him a coward and turned to run. The others pushed. Someone drew a gun. Mason swore he never saw who fired first, that when she fell, he panicked and screamed, but the laughter wouldn't stop. They laughed, he whispered. They really did. I closed my eyes briefly. Her last words replayed inside me. They laughed while they did it. When I opened them again, Mason was shaking. It wasn't supposed to happen. Yet it did, I said quietly. And you buried her with lies. They made me. Logan. He told us to keep our mouths shut, said he'd fix everything. He did, didn't he? The files, the cameras, the cops. He handled it all. Finally, truth had drawn breath. Fiona stepped out from the shadows of the hallway where she'd been recording, her voice steady. Everything you just said is admissible, Mason. Every word. He turned wild-eyed. You tricked me. No, I said. You tricked yourself the night you traded decency for pride. He rose suddenly, fists tight, but Hunter appeared beside the doorway like silence given shape. Mason backed down instantly, breaking under the weight of so many watching ghosts. I tore a sheet from the printer and wrote an address on it. This is the DA's office. You go there tomorrow. Tell them exactly what you told us. Or I'll make sure the rest of the city hears that recording first. He snatched the paper, hatred flickering behind wet eyes. You think this will bring her back? No, I said. But it might bring you face to face with what you buried. He left, slamming the door so hard the window shuddered. Fiona sat opposite me, both hands trembling around the recorder. You finally have it. Confession, motive, involvement, Logan's name. That's enough to reopen the case. I know, I murmured. Then why do you look like this doesn't matter? Because justice on paper is smaller than the hole she left. We sat in silence until the first light of dawn touched the blinds. Somewhere inside that weak sunrise, I felt my body heavier but soul oddly steady. The next evening, news broke before dawn. Police filings could go through. Mason had been hospitalized after a crash. According to witnesses, his car swerved off the bridge near Wilson Creek. No other vehicle involved. Police called it an accident. Fiona called me immediately. He was supposed to meet the DA today. Yes, I said. They silenced him. They panicked. I corrected. When guilt starts speaking, cowards shoot the messenger. I stood by the window watching the empty streetlights flicker over the gym entrance. A single rose had been placed on the doorstep. No note. No camera caught who left it. Silence had taste that night, iron and rain. By the following week, the gym felt heavier again. The boys showed up wearing black bands, pretending camaraderie for the camera crews waiting outside. Reporters asked if they'd lost a brother. Preston spoke first, saying Mason had demons, that no one could have helped him. Lies rehearsed, smiles forced. I turned away before they could look up at the office window. If vengeance were an infection, I could feel it entering my veins slower now. Colder, more deliberate. Logan returned the next morning, acting sympathetic. Tragic, isn't it? We lose one, and the press eats us alive. You lost your humanity long ago, I replied. He sneered. Careful, Commander. Push too far, and you might join him. Maybe, I said quietly. But if I go down, I'm dragging the truth with me. That night, Fiona found me rearranging files again. What now? She asked tiredly. You've got proof of corruption, a dead witness, and ghosts filling the air. How far do you intend to go? Far enough that silence can't resurrect arrogance. She placed a hand on my arm. Then start preparing. Trials are slow. Dangerous. Everyone you threaten owns someone above them. Then I'll own something stronger, I said. What's that? Patience. The next day, I visited Violet's grave. The cemetery wind smelled of clay and old prayers. I set down the rose from the gym's doorstep. Mason's gone, I whispered. He confessed before he fell. Maybe that counts. Somewhere behind the sigh of wind, I thought I heard her voice again, soft, forgiving, proud. But it might have been just memory pretending to comfort me. When I turned to leave, a folded piece of paper fluttered under my windshield wiper. 6 words written in bold marker. You're not the only one watching. I looked around the empty road. Nothing but leaves moving across asphalt. The war wasn't over. It had just changed terrain again. The message under my windshield stayed burned in my vision long after I crumpled it. You're not the only one watching. It meant someone else knew what I'd done, what I knew, maybe even what I planned next. For the first time in months, the hunter inside me felt the air shift, the unseen eyes, the quiet footsteps that follow from safe distance. Fiona wanted to call the police. I refused. Cops had already proven their loyalty cost less than ink on a signature. I decided instead to move quietly. Within a week, Mason's taped confession reached the district attorney's office through Fiona's channels. It reopened the case, at least on paper. But papers don't breathe justice. People do, and these people had price tags instead of consciences. The first hearing arrived faster than expected. The courthouse felt colder than usual, all marble and whispers. Reporters filled the steps. Cameras flashed, throwing brief lightning into gray winter skies. Logan showed up in a dark suit, his charm perfectly pressed, his smile rehearsed. Behind him trailed the remaining fighters, heads bowed, not for respect, but for optics. When the judge entered, silence rippled like a drill line, standing at attention. The prosecutor laid out evidence. Mason's recorded voice, dates, financial links to Logan, security tampering records. For a moment, I believed truth might survive contact with the system. Then Logan's lawyer stood. Polished, young, wearing arrogance like armor. He called it all circumstantial. Claimed the audio had been manipulated and the witness, Mason, was mentally unstable, proven by his sudden suicide. He painted Violet as a troubled woman involved romantically with more than one athlete, suggested altercation, passion, regret. Each lie landed like a dull blade twisting through my ribs. I kept my posture steady, fingers tightening on the wooden bench until the skin whitened. Fiona rose calmly to counter, but the judge interrupted before she could reach full defense. Without a primary witness, he said, this case remains speculative. Just like that, months of agony reduced to speculation. When the gavel struck, Logan turned slightly, met my eyes, and smiled. A small, cruel curve that said he'd won again. The echo of that gavel wasn't judgment. It was mockery. We walked out through corridors of muttering spectators. Fiona touched my arm gently. There will be appeals, she said. Her voice tried to sound steady, but I saw defeat riding through it. They just buried her twice, I said. Once in soil, once in paperwork. By the time we reached the parking lot, a drizzle had begun, soft but cold. The same kind of rain that had fallen the night Violet died. I let it wash over my face, hoping it might cleanse something inside. It didn't. It only remembered. They think it's over, I murmured. What are you going to do? Fiona asked. Build a court that doesn't need permission to speak. The next day, I resigned officially from the gym's visible management. Public reason, health. Private reason, freedom. I didn't need a title anymore. I already owned every inch of their comfort zone. Hunter handled daily operations. I worked in shadows, developing what soldiers once called environmental interrogation, pressures applied through consequence, not confrontation. They wouldn't go to jail, but they'd live inside one. I started with Kyle. Anonymous leaks turned his sponsor audits public, uncovering false medical reports and tax evasion. The news spread like infection across sports media. His name trended for all the wrong reasons. Then Preston's gambling debts resurfaced, creditors at his doorstep. Tristan quit training halfway through a session, muttering about bad omens. Blake stopped showing altogether. Logan tried to rally them. We can come back from this, he said during a recorded motivational speech that I conveniently leaked later, right after splicing in Mason's confessional whisper, looping faintly under the background music. Online viewers called it haunting. Sponsors called it reputation suicide. A week later, Hunter reported they'd started locking themselves inside the gym at night, drinking. Once, he said, Kyle swore he saw Violet's reflection in a mirror near the ring and punched it until his hands bled. Newspapers labeled it mental breakdown of a disgraced athlete. Justice was moving, slow, quiet, shaping pain into balance. But Fiona didn't see it that way. You're torturing them, she said when she came to see me. I'm giving them what they created. This isn't the court you talked about, Adrian. This is vengeance with better vocabulary. Call it what you want, I said, pouring coffee that went untouched. She left angry, muttering something about turning in the remaining evidence herself if I wouldn't stop. Maybe she really would. Maybe that was good, someone still believing there was a lawful version of good left somewhere. That night, I drove past the courtroom again. Empty now, dark. The marble pillars looked like gravestones in rainlight. I sat there for an hour watching the drops gather on the windshield, thinking of all the uniforms I'd worn and all the oaths I'd spoken. Not one of them had prepared me for a world this quiet about cruelty. Then I saw him, Logan, emerging from the side gate with an umbrella, laughing on the phone, free. Some rage doesn't need heat. It burns on oxygen alone. I followed from distance, lights off, until he parked at a downtown bar known for deals made in whispers. That was when a decision solidified. His pride would be the next courthouse. His audience, his own men. The next morning, an invitation arrived for all 4 remaining fighters. A private meeting to discuss sponsorship revival, under my company seal. The location, their beloved gym. Time, midnight. None of them declined. When the hour came, rain pounded again. Power flickered as they entered one by one, Logan last. Inside, the ring lights glowed dim amber, like confession lamps. The sound system clicked on automatically. Mason's voice filled the air. Calm replayed truth. They laughed while they did it. The doors locked behind them, all remote. Upstairs in my unseen office, I watched through screens as panic rippled. Kyle shouted. Preston cursed. Logan barked orders no one followed. I let them sweat, 20 minutes exactly, before the PA system engaged and my voice carried across the hall for the first time without disguise. Court in session, I said. They froze. Blake looked upward into the camera nearest the ring, his face wet, not from rain. Evidence will now speak. I continued, triggering the series of recordings, their boasts, deleted chats, each lie displayed across digital screens wrapping the walls. Their own confessions became prosecution. Their own echoes, verdict. No gavel. No judge. Only truth looping louder until denial died under it. Logan shouted, "Who are you?" I didn't answer this time. The silence answered for me. After 15 minutes of their panic, the locks released. They fled like weasels smelling smoke. But I didn't chase. I'd never need to again. The media would. The leaks were already scheduled to drop at dawn. When sunlight finally returned, Fiona called. You leaked it all, didn't you? They deserved a jury, I said. Public opinion isn't justice. It's more permanent than verdicts written in pencil. She hesitated. You realize Logan will come after you now. I've already built the trap he thinks is an escape. Back at the gym that morning, I wiped dust from Violet's bracelet hanging beside my desk. The building was silent, but not empty. It thrummed with unseen equilibrium. The world outside would soon devour those men with the same hunger they once laughed with. The system failed, the courtroom failed, but silence itself had sided with truth for once. Still, part of me wished I could unhear her last breath. By dawn, the internet had done what the courtroom wouldn't. The leaked audio files spread like wildfire. Millions of listeners heard Mason's last confession, Logan's dismissive laughter, and the quiet cruelty in their voices. News channels scrambled to cover the Grindmaster scandal. Hashtags demanding justice trended globally. Sponsors didn't just pull out. They issued public apologies for ever associating with the gym. When I arrived at the office, protesters already lined the sidewalk outside, holding signs with Violet's name. For the first time, her memory wasn't just mine to carry. The city was waking up. Inside, the gym felt different. Colder. Shadows seemed to linger longer in corners. Hunter met me near the entrance, looking tired but grimly satisfied. They didn't show up today, he said. Good, I answered. Let them feel what it's like to have nowhere to go. The destruction of their lives wasn't violent. It was absolute. Kyle was the first to crumble. His fiancée left him publicly, citing the recordings. He was spotted drinking alone at bars, shouting at strangers who recognized him. Then came the eviction notice. Without sponsorship money, his luxury apartment turned into a debt trap. A week later, he was arrested for a bar fight, screaming that ghosts were watching him. Preston tried to flee. He booked a flight overseas, but his passport triggered an alert at the airport due to pending financial investigation, a flag Fiona had quietly arranged through regulatory channels. He returned home to find his car repossessed and his family refusing to answer his calls. Isolation is a prison without bars. Tristan simply vanished into silence. Rumors said he moved back with his parents, refusing to leave his room, haunted by the digital echo of his own laughter played on every news cycle. And Blake was different. He came to the gym one last time. It was late evening when I found him sitting on the edge of the ring, head in hands. The lights were off, only street lamps casting long, pale stripes across the floor. He didn't look up as I approached. I knew who you were, he whispered. I stopped a few feet away. Did you? Not at first, but the way you looked at that spot, where she fell. Only a father looks at concrete like it's a grave. I didn't deny it. Why are you here, Blake? He lifted his head. His eyes were red, hollowed out by sleeplessness. I wanted to tell you. I didn't laugh. That night, I didn't laugh. But you didn't stop them either. He flinched as if struck. I know. That's why I can't sleep. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. This is everything, he said, sliding it across the canvas. Dates, payouts, who covered for us, who Logan paid. It's all in there. Even the names of the cops. I looked at the book, then at him. Why give this now? He stood up, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Because silence is too loud when you're alone. He walked out into the night without looking back. I never saw him again. But the notebook remained. Heavy, filled with ink that would soon become iron bars for others. The next day, Fiona came by. When she saw the notebook, she went pale. This brings down half the precinct, she whispered. Then let it fall, I said. Adrian, people kill for less than a page of this. They already killed for less, I reminded her. She took the book, her hands trembling slightly. I'll get this to the federal prosecutor. No local cops. No leaks. Direct to the top. Do it fast, I said. Logan knows walls are closing in. Rats bite hardest when cornered. That night, the temperature dropped. Frost covered the windows of the gym, turning the glass opaque. I sat in the office, reviewing the final pieces of the puzzle. The empire Logan built was now ash. The boys were ruined. The truth was out. Yet, peace still felt distant. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, expecting a reporter. You think you're clever, Commander? Logan's voice. Slurred, angry, desperate. I think I'm patient, I replied calm. You ruined everything. My gym, my name, my life. You ruined them yourself, I said. I just turned the lights on. He laughed, a jagged sound like glass breaking. Lights go out too, old man. Watch your back. Soldiers bleed just like the rest of us. The line went dead. I placed the phone down slowly. Fear didn't rise in me, only readiness. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and took out something I hadn't touched in 20 years. A tactical knife. Old steel, scarred but sharp. Some wars you fight with loss. Others, you prepare for the old way. The following days felt suspended in time. The gym remained closed for maintenance, but I stayed inside, waiting. The air grew heavier, as if the building itself knew violence was returning to its doorstep. One afternoon, I found a shattered window near the back exit. Nothing stolen, just a message. A rock wrapped in a page from a medical journal, an article about blunt force trauma. A threat dressed as a reminder. I swept the glass away without emotion. They wanted fear. They would get strategy instead. I called Hunter. Take the week off, I ordered. You expecting trouble? He asked instantly. I'm expecting an ending, I said. I can stay. No, this part won't do alone. He hesitated, then agreed. He knew the look in a man's eyes when a mission became personal. By Friday, the silence was absolute. The city outside moved on. New scandals, new news, but inside these walls, time stood still. I walked the empty floor, footsteps echoing. I stopped at the heavy bag where Mason used to train. It swung slightly, moved by a draft. They laughed. The words replayed in my mind. Quieter now, less like a scream and more like a verdict. I went to the locker room. On the bench sat a single glove, Kyle's left one, abandoned. Beside it, a photo of the 5 of them, torn in half. The smiles were gone, ripped away by their own hands. It was done. They were broken. But the head of the snake was still moving. As I turned to leave, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then darkness. The main breaker had been pulled. I didn't panic. I didn't run. I stood still in the blackness, listening. The sound of a door forcing open, metal against metal, drifted from the rear entrance. Footsteps. Heavy. Not one person. 2. Maybe 3. I moved silently toward the shadows of the mezzanine, merging with the dark. If they wanted a fight in the dark, they had forgotten one thing. Soldiers don't fear the dark. We own it. Dark swallowed the gym whole. The hum of city life outside fell away until only breath and heartbeat existed. I'd lived through ambushes before, the seconds where instinct outweighs thought, but this silence was different. It felt personal, vengeful, closing in slow. A faint metallic click echoed near the entrance. More movement by the old sparring room. Then Logan's voice, low and deliberate. End of the line, Commander. I stayed still behind the mezzanine railing, eyes adjusting, tracing silhouettes. Two men flanked him, probably Kyle and Preston by their builds, moving nervously. They carried flashlights like weapons, slicing the dark with narrow beams that made them more visible than protected. Come out. Logan's voice wavered behind the silver light. You want justice, right? Let's finish it. I waited, counting steps. When Kyle moved closer to the ring, his beam swept across the hanging heavy bag, just long enough to reveal the glint of steel wire I'd rigged hours earlier for security repairs. When he brushed it, the light fell from his hand, cracking against the floor. Darkness swallowed them again. Their curse broke the silence. I dropped from the mezzanine, landing soft at the far corner. The sound of combat boots meeting mats startled Preston. He swung the flashlight blindly. The beam caught my shoulder briefly before I shoved it down. He stumbled backward, tripping on the cable reel near the wall. Logan's gun clicked, the sound I'd been waiting for. I stepped behind a pillar. He fired once, twice, both deafening in the confined space. Sparks jumped from the steel frame of the boxing ring. Still hiding, he shouted. You hid behind uniforms and children, I said quietly, voice echoing from everywhere. The power resumed suddenly. The main breaker re-engaged itself on a timer I'd installed long before this night. Floodlights ignited with a blinding hiss. The entire gym revealed itself in white glare. The banners, the blood-stained floor, the three men frozen mid-motion. Logan squinted toward me. You planned this. I stepped into the light. Every inch. His fury twisted into deranged laughter. You think this makes you the hero? No heroes left here, I said. Only records to settle. Kyle pushed forward, fist shaking. You ruined our lives. You did that when you chose silence over mercy, I said, matching his stare. He swung first, reckless, desperate. I sidestepped, catching his momentum, redirecting him to the floor. He hit hard, groaning, the fight leaking out instantly. Preston froze, unwilling to move closer. Logan still aimed the pistol, but his hand trembled. You won't shoot, I said. You'd miss, and missing would crush what's left of your pride. He snarled. Try me. I took a step closer. Another. Each step stripped him further of control. You said we could come back from this, I reminded him. You told them to laugh while she begged. Tell me, Logan, do you still hear that laughter when you close your eyes? His mouth opened, but no sound came. The shakes reached his shoulders. I saw it. The collapse of a man forced to hear his own echo return as judgment. Police sirens wailed faintly from far away. No one in the room noticed yet, but the notebook Fiona had turned over earlier must have triggered arrests. Justice was arriving belatedly, crawling through proper channels, unaware that the verdict was already decided here. I motioned toward the speakers. You want truth? Hear it. The recorded confessions played again, Mason's broken voice overlapping with Logan's orders, the laughter of that night filling every corner of the gym. It wasn't just noise. It was evidence carved into sound. Preston covered his ears, shouting that it wasn't real. Kyle wept openly on the floor. Logan stumbled backward until his foot caught the ring rope, dropping the gun. It slid across the mat and stopped near where Violet had fallen months ago. Fate, or maybe something beyond it, wanted full circle. I didn't move. I simply said, pick it up if you can still call yourself a man. He didn't. He fell to his knees. When the sirens grew louder, I stepped aside. Logan looked up through tears and sweat. They'll arrest me, but they'll free me again. Men like me always land on our feet. Not this time, I said. Your signatures are on the wiring payments, the deleted files, Mason's gag money. And now on the weapon you just dropped." He looked at the pistol as if noticing it for the first time, realizing his fingerprints sealed his own confession. Outside, red and blue lights began painting the walls through the windows. The others stumbled away from me toward the entrance, surrender written in every limp motion. When the door burst open, officers shouted commands. They didn't aim at anyone. They didn't need to. The entire crime was still speaking through the gym speakers. Logan's scream drowned under the cuffs snapping shut. After they dragged the men out, I stayed alone amid the aftermath. The gym smelled of rubber, smoke, and release. I sank onto the ring steps, the same place Violet once watched matches proudly. For the first time in endless months, no rage lived behind my eyes. Fiona entered quietly through the side door. "It's over," she said. "They confessed on the record. Every single one." I nodded. "I didn't have to touch them. You knew the law would come eventually. I just had to keep the truth alive long enough for it to arrive." She looked around the devastated gym. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, staring at the faint bloodstain still visible near the ropes. "Now she can rest." When dawn crept in, I walked outside. Reporters were gathering already, calling my name, flashing cameras. I didn't answer any questions. I looked at the horizon instead. In it, the first sliver of sunlight cut through clouds like a new verdict. For once, the air felt clean. Quiet didn't sound like grief anymore. It sounded like her laughter, gentle and unbroken, carried by morning wind. Morning light brought no triumph, only stillness. The police cars were gone, the crowds thinning, the echo of cameras fading down the street. I stood at the doorway of the gym that had become both battlefield and tomb. Its silence pressed the truth against my chest. Justice had come, but victory still felt hollow. Inside, dust drifted through sunbeams cutting across the ruined ring. Every rope frayed, every mat stained with memory. I ran my hand along the corner post where Violet used to lean when she came to watch sparring sessions, smiling each time my soldiers visited. That memory still burned too bright to touch. Fiona walked in quietly, holding the morning paper. The headline stretched in bold: "Coach Logan and 4 fighters found guilty of homicide and corruption ring. They'll spend life in prison," she said. "No parole." I nodded without emotion. Prisons can't do what conscience does. She studied me carefully. "You should feel relief." "I do," I said. "But peace and relief aren't the same thing." She set the paper aside. "They seized Logan's accounts, the properties, even the vehicles. The gym is yours if you want it." I looked around. "No, let it rot. Every nail in this place belongs to memory now." By afternoon, reporters swarmed outside, chasing statements. I gave none. Officials called, thanking me for cooperation in uncovering a citywide scandal. They used clean words to describe a dirty truth, erasing pain with protocol. When the last call ended, I shut off my phone permanently. That night, I sat beside the window of my apartment, watching headlights smear across wet asphalt. The rain had returned, soft but constant, sound without violence. On the desk near me lay the folder I'd kept since day one. Photos, transcripts, evidence. Every page smelled faintly of vengeance. Hunter visited once to say goodbye before moving to another state. He shook my shoulder firmly. "You did what fathers should do," he said. "No," I replied. "I did what soldiers do when war follows them home." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the same thing." He left me the whistle he had used in training, the last sound that had ever forced those men into order. When he was gone, I locked the building one final time and slid the keys under the door. One evening, months later, Fiona called from Washington. The federal inquiry found more names, judges, officers, sponsors. "You started something bigger than you know." "I didn't start it," I told her. "I just stopped letting it hide." She paused. "You ever think about retiring somewhere peaceful? Vermont, maybe? Build something new." "I already built what I needed. It just doesn't have walls anymore." She breathed softly. "Then promise me one thing. Whatever ghosts are left, don't live with them forever." I don't, I said. I visit sometimes, but I don't live there. Spring arrived. Grass finally grew over Violet's grave, gentle and green. I visited on a Sunday morning carrying two things, a small journal and an ultrasound photo sealed in glass. I knelt down, brushed the stone clean, and spoke quietly. You were right, I said. The strongest people fight quiet battles. I made too much noise for too long. But the world remembers now. Your name means justice here. A breeze lifted my hair and the petals of roses beside the stone. It felt like a nod, light and forgiving. I placed the ultrasound in front of the headstone. For the first time, my hands didn't shake. They'll live in cages until time forgets them, I said, voice steady. But your story will keep saving others who think silence has power. The wind rose, carrying distant church bells. I stood, exhaling everything left. The sunset painted the sky copper and red, two colors that once meant blood and now meant release. I whispered her name one final time, not out of grief, but gratitude. That night, I wrote my last entry in the journal. Wars end differently for each soldier. Some bring back medals. Some bring back ghosts. I brought back her peace. Then I closed the book, placed it beside the photograph on my living room shelf, and turned off the light. The city hummed quietly outside, alive, ordinary, unknowing. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like home. Months passed in quiet rhythm. Life in the city began to sound normal again. Buses, laughter, music leaking from storefronts. People no longer whispered about the army commander's revenge. They just nodded respectfully when they saw me, a man who had finally put ghosts to rest. Fiona visited one evening. The same sunset burned through my window, painting the floor in amber light. She placed a thin envelope on my table. State compensation for Violet's case, she said softly. They finally acknowledged wrongdoing. I looked at it, but didn't reach for it. Money never measures worth. I know, she said. That's not why I brought it. Read the second page. I unfolded the paper. A letter from a young woman named Eliza, the vanished street vendor, the only witness from that night. She'd resurfaced in another town under protection. Her words were small but sharp. I saw you there, sir. I saw how you dropped to your knees beside her. I never forgot. You made me believe silence can speak after all. For a second, the air left my lungs. Someone besides me had carried her memory, and that meant the story had already stepped beyond my hands. Looks like you changed more than one life, Fiona said, smiling gently. I nodded. Maybe that's what redemption really is, when pain you couldn't control becomes light for someone else. The weeks drifted into softer days. I worked part-time training veterans at a rehabilitation camp, teaching them patience more than drills. At night, I walked by the seaside pier where I'd thrown away my evidence box. Waves whispered below, constant and forgiving. One evening, I saw a small boy drop a paper boat into the tide. His mother called him to hurry. He laughed and ran back into her arms. That laughter made me close my eyes because for a heartbeat, it sounded like her. Violet's laughter, pure, alive, free. Perhaps that's how healing arrives. Not as grand miracles, but quiet echoes reminding us that love outlives damage. Before leaving, I recorded one last message for the channel Fiona convinced me to start. A space for stories like mine, for people who had been betrayed but never broken. The red light blinked on. I looked straight into the lens. My name's Adrian. Maybe you've followed this journey. Maybe it reached you tonight for the first time. Either way, I want to ask you something honest. What would you fight for if the world stole everything that made you smile? Tell me in the comments below,